Is this the longest LDR ever? Hi everyone, Simon here again. Today's topic is about LDR, long distance relationships. Now, Sherry and I met in 2015 when we both worked in Dubai. In 2016, we went to the Philippines and got married in Manila. At that same time, I was offered the opportunity to go back to the UK to start a new company for the business I worked for in Dubai. And Cherry and I spoke about it, and basically it was too good to miss. So it was decided that I would leave the Philippines and Dubai, go back to the UK, and Cherry would follow me in a few months' time. That's what should have happened. Okay, so I went back to the UK, I found a home, started the company, the business, started to trade, and soon after we found out that Cherry got a hit on her passport. But it took a few months to go through the system. So about 3 months after I got back to the UK, Cherry called me to say that the authorities had been in contact because there was a hit on her passport. So we didn't know what that was. It turned out there was two similar names or something like that entered the Philippines at that similar time. So they had to ask questions. So basically, they asked Cherry to turn herself in, believe it or not. So she did. And as a result, the authorities here in the Philippines made a case against Cherry, and we were gobsmacked. I mean, you couldn't write this. So that was in late 2016. Because the authorities put a case, we had to go through a legal process, and I was told it could take 2 or 3 years, and even that was hellish. But what could we do? So we hired a lawyer, started the process, the hearing started, and at the same time, I was travelling from the UK to see Cherry twice a month for 2 weeks at a time. And oh my God, it was so tough. Saying hello, then goodbye, and my God, it was a really, really horrible situation. You just have those feelings knowing you're going to see your wife, and then to leave your wife for months on end. It's, you know, it was horrendous. So the case carried on, and each year went by. And I think it was maybe 2 years later, I got offered the role of CEO for the UK for Pirelli tyres, and then consequently CCO for the same company based in Istanbul in Turkey. Now one of the needs I kind of demanded for that role was to have the opportunity to see my wife more than twice a year. I'm sure you'd all agree that seeing your wife for 2 weeks twice a year, of course, it's never going to be long enough. So Pirelli agreed, thankfully. So I was based in Istanbul, and they agreed for me to travel, get this, travel to the Philippines for a long weekend every single month. Yes. So I was travelling from Istanbul to Turkey, Istanbul to the Philippines every month for a long weekend. So I would get a late flight from Istanbul on a Thursday evening, go into Manila, late afternoon on the Friday, spent Friday, Sunday, Monday with Cherry, and then got the flight late back on Monday evening. Now, that was kind of workable to a degree, because that meant we were seeing each other every month for about 3 or 4 days, a long weekend. And I know some couples do that now. So to go from having 2 weeks, 2 times a year, to seeing each other every month was, it was a godsend. Okay, it was hard for me still leaving her for a few weeks, and I was living in Istanbul in Turkey. Cherry was still, at the time, I think it was 6 hours ahead. Or was it 4 hours? Anyway, so it was either 4 or 6 hours ahead of Turkey. But anyway, we managed this situation. It was working, and all the time, this case was going on. Now, COVID arrived. So we know what happened then. There was no flights, lockdowns all around the world. And I was in lockdown for 3 months in Istanbul in Turkey, and same in the Philippines. So no flights, no travel. Now when the restrictions eased, because I was married to a Filipina, I could apply to the authorities in the embassy in Istanbul to get a specialist visa to travel under COVID rules. So I got excited, the fact that I could get a visa, and I had to go through a really long process to get the visa, and sometimes the rule changed, I was apply for it again. It was really, really horrible times for all of us during COVID. So I was flying to the Philippines, sometimes on a flight, only me on the flight. I mean, it was surreal, to be on a flight, being the only passenger. I mean, obviously that's not going to be cost effective, but I'm sure they had to do the routes to expatriate or this kind of situation, but literally there was only me on one flight. And even though there was lots of space in economy, I flew business class. It had to be done. It had to be done. So it was a 10-hour flight every time I go and see Cherry. And I always flew business class. But when I looked back and looked around and saw no one there, I thought, this is very surreal. Very surreal. But anyway, the service I got, of course, was was fantastic. I was the only passenger on the plane. So I would land in Manila, get a taxi, and then go to a quarantine for 1 week in a hotel in Manila. And I did that quite a few times. But at the time, I could have an extended period in the Philippines working remotely, thank God, because everyone was working remotely at that time, apart from the emergency services, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's very surreal. Now when COVID ended, I actually got offered a higher position working for a different company. So I went back to the UK to start another business, which turned out to be quite successful. And all this time, this case was going on. So this was going into 2020, 2021, when COVID was kind of easing. So that was like 4 years, 5 years of us being separated for long periods of time. And so now December 2025, and believe it or not, the case was only dismissed around 6 weeks ago. Unbelievable. So it took from 2016 to 2025 for the case to be dismissed. I mean, I know things are very, very slow here in the Philippines, but come on, 8 years? 9 years? Shocking system. I mean, even if you backed out COVID, say 2 years, it's still like 6, 7 years that this case was going on, and at the end, it got dismissed. Of course, it would be dismissed. It was just garbage. So when I went to the UK, it was in the spring of 2023 when I got the phone call from Cherry to say this farm had become available, and as a result I took early retirement at age 55. That was in the spring summer of 2023. So Cherry and I have been physically living together now for just over 2 years, but we spent so long being separated, so long. It was gut-wrenching. Every time I had to leave her, she was in tears, and we used to Skype. At the time, Skype was the big thing. Skype a lot, but because of the time difference, it was 8 hours between the UK and the Philippines. So I was finishing work, come home, Cherry was almost going to sleep, so you had to work around different time zones. So, is this the longest LDR ever? It could be. It really could be. When I think back what we went through with the case, the financial cost of the case, COVID, me being quarantined for a week in Manila, and in one case I was staying in a hotel and literally I could see our home from the window from the hotel, but I couldn't go there. I couldn't leave the room for 1 week, and then at the end of that week somebody came from the authorities to test you for COVID, and you had to wait, I think, 1 day to get the results, and then when it was clear, then you could leave the hotel. So I mean, what a palaver. So I don't know if this is the longest LDR ever, but it certainly felt that way to Cherry and I. But we were so grateful that I could retire at the age of 55 and build our new home in the Philippines, and believe me, I make sure that I enjoy every day with my wife. Sometimes it's difficult. Filipino women, but I love her. She's amazing, she's beautiful, she's funny, she makes me laugh even when she doesn't mean to. So yeah, this could be the longest LDR ever. If it's not, please message in the video below and tell me how long your LDR was or is. As always, guys, I always appreciate you watching my videos. Please like, share and subscribe, and I'll catch you all on the next one. Bye for now.